At the Juneteenth cookout, my mother stood on the back porch holding a paper plate and told everyone that my sister would be raising my daughter from now on. Amara's been grieving too long, she said loud enough for the whole yard to hear. Zara needs a real mother, not someone who's falling apart. My father nodded beside her. My sister looked down, but I saw the corner of her mouth twitch. I kept passing plates and refilling drinks, smiling like I hadn't just been told I was losing my child. They thought my silence meant I accepted it. What they didn't know was that the smartwatch on my daughter's wrist had been recording for months, and every word they said that day was already sitting on that watch, waiting. They had no idea they had just given me everything I needed to take my daughter back for good. My name is Amara Caldwell, 39 years old. If you've ever been told you weren't fit to raise your own child, stay with me. If you've ever sat at a table where the people who were supposed to love you decided who you were without asking, this story is for you. I won't waste your time. The morning of the cookout, I drove Zara from our little house in Sunnyside up to my mother's place on Reed Road, 18 minutes. Zara was 8 years and 2 months old, going on 9, and she was wearing the sunflower dress she had picked out herself the night before. Her daddy used to tell her yellow was his favorite color. She knew that. She remembered everything about him in the smallest, most stubborn ways. She was quiet in the back seat, too quiet for a child who normally narrated traffic out loud and made up names for the dogs we passed. She held the threadbare brown bear we called Beans Bear in her lap and rested her chin on the top of his head. I watched her in the rear view and let her have her silence. I knew where the silence was coming from. I had 3 weeks of evidence telling me where it was coming from. About a mile from my mother's house, she finally spoke. "Mommy, will Grammy be mad if I don't help her bring the plates this year?" "No, baby," I said. "You don't have to help her with anything today." She tilted her head against the window. We turned onto Reed Road and then, almost too quiet to hear, she said, "Mommy, does Grammy mean it when she says you're sad?" I told her Mommy was tired, but not sad in the way that made people sick. I told her that some grown-ups confused the two. I parked behind my sister's white Lexus, and for a moment I just sat in the front seat and held the steering wheel until my knuckles stopped shaking. The backyard was already set up the way my mother always set it up. A folding table that ran 8 feet long, dressed in a red and white tablecloth she hand-washed every June. 2 coolers full of Topo Chico and Sprite and water. The Oklahoma Joe smoker was rolling out blue-gray smoke from a brisket she had been tending for 14 hours. There was a Bluetooth speaker on the back of a chair playing Frankie Beverly. Frankie had passed last September, and Mama had been playing him at every gathering since, like a kind of communion. I liked it. I let it pull a little of the dread out of my chest. Devin met me at the side gate, my sister's husband, with 2 paper plates already in his hand. He didn't quite look at me when he said hello. Court's inside. Mom's on the porch already. He was looking at his shoes the whole time. I thanked him and took Zara's hand. Inside, my sister Brianna was laughing too loudly at something cousin Maxine had said, and the laugh stopped a half-second too late when I walked in. She turned her face into her hair so I wouldn't see it had been on. I saw it had been on. My mother was at the kitchen island smiling, opening a Tupperware of potato salad. She hugged Zara from behind with both arms and held her a beat too long. She put her mouth next to my daughter's ear and said something I couldn't hear. Zara did not look up at her grandmother. She looked at me. And in that look, there was a question I had spent 4 months reading and that I had finally found the answer to 2 days before. I gave her a small nod, and she let her shoulders drop an inch. And that was when I knew. Whatever my mother had been rehearsing with her, my daughter had already chosen which side of the porch she was on. I let go of her hand and started laying out paper plates. The relatives came in waves. My Aunt Simone, my mother's younger sister, 62 years old, and the best of the women in our family, who hugged me too long at the door and whispered, "Baby, are you eating? You look pretty, but tired." My Uncle Calvin, my father's brother, a deacon, who shook my hand and didn't ask anything else. Mrs. Paulette Graves from next door, 74, who had known me since I was a foot tall. Cousin Maxine, Cousin Darnell, Pastor Jerome Childress arrived with his wife in matching cream. 4 neighbors, 2 co-workers of my mother's from the catering business she ran out of her garage. 22 people in all, plus Zara, plus me. I counted. I had been counting all month. I counted because counting is what dispatchers do when our hands have nothing useful to do. 2 chairs near the head of the table had been kept open by my mother, draped with a folded napkin each. 1 was for Brianna. 1, I noticed, was for Zara. There was no chair near my mother for me. I didn't ask. I sat in the 3rd chair down on the long side between Aunt Simone and Mrs. Graves, and I poured sweet tea into other people's mason jars when they were half empty. Around 1:40, my mother knocked her wedding ring against the side of the folding table 3 times. The yard quieted. Pastor Jerome stood up to bless the food, the way he always did at every family cookout for the last 15 years, and my mother lifted a hand toward him. "Pastor, give me a minute first." Her voice was not warm. Pastor Jerome sat back down. She looked at me across the table, and before she said anything else, she looked at me for a full 3 seconds like she was making sure I was watching. You have to understand the size of what was about to happen by understanding what came before it. I'm going to take a minute. Bear with me. I grew up in this family with 1 sister, Brianna, 4 years younger than me, and 1 rule that everyone agreed to without saying it out loud. Brianna was the soft one. I was the strong one. Those were my mother's 2 words for us, used so often through our childhood that I learned by 9 years old what each word meant. Soft meant Brianna got the new shoes. Strong meant I got the lecture about not crying when my shoes didn't fit. Soft meant Brianna got to keep her room clean because she was sensitive to dust. Strong meant I cleaned the kitchen because I could handle it. My mother said it like she was complimenting me. And for a long time I let her, because at 9 years old, being strong sounded like power. It wasn't power. It was a job. A job my mother handed me and never let me put down. I met Marcus Caldwell in the spring of 2014. I was a 911 dispatcher already, 2 years into a career I loved, and he was a Houston firefighter out of Station 35 up north near the airport. We met at an ER on a bad call. He was 35 hours into a shift, and I was 3. We didn't even exchange numbers that night. He came back to the dispatch center a week later with 2 coffees and asked if I was the woman with the steady voice. I said I was. He said, "Good. I needed to put a face to a sound I trust." We got married in June of 2016 at a small backyard ceremony in Galveston where his mother Nadine lived. Zara was born in November of 2017 after a long labor my mother spent the whole night calling me dramatic for. Marcus was the only person in my entire life who ever called me soft. The first time he said it, I cried. He held my face in both his hands and said, "Baby, you ain't strong. You're tired." Different word. In May of 2023, he didn't come home. He had taken a day off and driven down to Galveston the night before to see his mother. He was supposed to come back the next morning, pick Zara up from kindergarten, and the 3 of us were going to go for ice cream. On his way north on I-45, just past League City, a southbound 18-wheeler hauling steel crossed the median at 58 miles an hour. He died at the scene. The dispatcher who called me was a woman named Renee from the next dispatch district over. She did not say Mrs. Caldwell. She said, "Amara, it's Marcus. I-45 just past League City. You need to come." I made her say it twice, because the first time, it didn't land. Zara was 5 years and 6 months old. The settlement against the trucking company came 2 years later. $385,000. I put every cent of it into a trust for Zara until she turned 25. I didn't want it. It felt like the world handing me an apology written on the wrong piece of paper. the watch came before all of that. For Zara's 5th birthday in November of 2022, Marcus had walked into our living room with a small white box. Inside was an Apple Watch SE, the kid version, set up through Family Setup and paired to its own line on our family cellular plan. He had spent 2 weekends learning the parental controls. He sat down on the rug with her and showed her how to make a call to mommy. He showed her how to tell the watch to call 911. And then he showed her one more thing. He pulled up the Voice Memos app, which he had pinned to her watch face as a tap shortcut, and he said, "Live, bug. If anything ever sounds wrong around you, you just tap. You don't have to be brave. You just have to tap. That's all. The watch will remember it for you, and mommy and daddy will hear it later." She nodded the way a 5-year-old nods when she's pretending to understand something she only half does. She tapped the shortcut. The voice memo started. She giggled. He stopped it. The recording saved to our family iCloud account on my phone. I opened my phone that night and saw a folder appear. Zara's watch. I never opened it again while Marcus was alive. I didn't need to. He died 6 months later. For 2.5 years, the folder sat in my phone. Zara tapped it maybe 3 or 4 times in those years. Always at night, always alone in her room, always after a nightmare. The memos were of her own quiet breathing, and once of her saying, "Daddy, are you there?" I never told anyone about those. I didn't open them for a long time. They were hers. After Marcus died, my mother moved into the empty places in our life, like water. The first week, she was a help I cried over. She cooked. She picked Zara up from school. In the fall of 2023, she offered to come over and sort through Marcus's things with me because I had still not gone into his small office at the back of the house. She did it almost entirely alone over the course of 3 weeks. 3 banker's boxes labeled in her handwriting. Marcus personal cards, letters, birthday notes he had written to Zara, photo album captions, notes from his fire station in his handwriting on lined yellow paper. I let her. I was grateful. By Easter of 2024, the gratitude had quietly become something else. "Amara, I'll take Zara for the weekend, sweetheart. You rest." It was always the same sentence. By the fall of 2024, every Wednesday after school and every Saturday morning, Zara was at my sister Brianna's house in Plano. I was working night shifts at the dispatch center and sleeping when I could. I told myself this was wisdom. I told myself I was lucky. By the start of 2025, Zara had started sleeping with something under her pillow she would not show me. And one Wednesday in January, my mother asked me in a kitchen I had stood in 1,000 times, "Amara, what was that little name Marcus used to call her? Lily something." I told her I couldn't remember. I knew exactly what it was. I just suddenly didn't want her to. You should know what my daughter is like before I tell you the rest. Otherwise, the rest is just a story about adults. Zara is the kind of child who introduces herself to dogs before she introduces herself to people. She reads above grade level, but she still asks me to braid her hair because she doesn't trust her own fingers. She inherited her father's exact laugh, the high, quick one that ends in a hiccup, and his exact left dimple. She has my hands. She has his name for me, Mommy, because he wouldn't let her call me Mommy past 5, and then he died at 5.5, and so she has used Mommy ever since, like a tribute to him. I never corrected her. Marcus called her Live Bug. Only Marcus. He wrote it on every birthday card from 2018 to 2022. He signed it on the inside of every Polaroid he ever took of her. It was their thing. My mother did not know it. My sister did not know it. I knew because I had been there when he made it up on a Friday night in November of 2018 when Zara, 1 year old, would not stop crawling under our couch, chasing what we eventually realized was a fat brown beetle. He laughed so hard he could not stand up. He said, "She's a little live bug, baby. She's a little bug." Look at her go. From that night on, that was her name. In the spring of 2025, Zara started saying small, strange things while I brushed her hair. Mommy, do letters from heaven take a long time to get here? Mommy, if Daddy could send a message, would he know our new address? We had not moved. There was no new address. I told myself it was grief. Grief, in children, does strange things. I told myself she was processing. I told myself my mother was helping. On a Thursday, in late March, Mrs. Denise Warren, who was Zara's second grade teacher at Pleasantville Elementary, sent me a kind, careful email. She wrote that Zara had drawn 3 pictures in art class over the last 3 weeks, and that all 3 pictures were of houses with 2 doors and 2 mothers. In one of them, Zara had drawn herself sleeping in the smaller house with a smiling woman, and in the other house she had drawn a sadder woman in a bed. Under the drawing she had written in a second grader's careful hand, "The safer house has a swing set." Mrs. Warren asked if she could speak with me. I wrote back that I would call her, but that I needed a month. I am ashamed of that. A month was too long. I knew it then. I gave it anyway, because some part of me still wanted my mother to be the woman she had been when she first showed up with the casserole. The month ended early. It was a Tuesday night in April. Zara was already asleep. I went into her room to fold the laundry on the chair, and when I leaned over to straighten her pillow, my hand closed around something flat and stiff under the pillowcase. I pulled it out. A cream envelope, the kind you buy at Hallmark. The flap was cut, not torn, with a knife. I stood very still in the middle of my daughter's room for what felt like a long time. And then I sat down on the edge of her bed, and I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of unlined paper folded into quarters. The handwriting on it was Marcus's. Or it was meant to be Marcus's. It was close enough to be Marcus's to a child. The slant was right. The way the T's leaned, the hook on the Y's. My dearest Zara, it began. Daddy is okay where I am. And Daddy wants you to know that your Aunt Brianna is the safe one for you now. Mommy is too sad. That's okay. Daddy chose love. I read it twice. I did not cry. I did not crumple the paper. I held it and I looked at it, and I thought one thing very clearly. The kind of thought a dispatcher thinks in the middle of a call when she understands what the caller is too panicked to say. Marcus had never called her Zara. He had called her Livebug. Every letter, every birthday card, every Polaroid. Livebug, this letter was signed Daddy. The name at the top was Zara. Whoever had written that letter did not know what to call my daughter. I stood up. I put the paper back exactly where I had found it, under the pillowcase. I did not wake her. I went into the kitchen, sat down at the table, and for the first time in 2.5 years, I opened the Zara's watch folder in my phone. Then, the twist came that I had not planned for. As I sat at that table at 2 a.m, scrolling through voice memos, I noticed a box on the shelf above the kitchen window. It was a small brown box I had not opened since Marcus died, because it had belonged to my mother-in-law Nadine originally, and she had left it with us years ago for safekeeping. Something made me stand up and pull it down. Inside, beneath 2 old Christmas cards, was a journal. A small brown leather journal with my mother's handwriting on the inside cover. Property of Patricia Greer, 1987, my mother had kept this journal the year before I was born. I almost put it back, but the pages fell open to an entry dated March of 1987, and I read it standing at my kitchen counter at 2:14 a.m. and felt the floor of the last 39 years of my life shift 3 degrees. The entry read, "I have been telling Pastor Miles that Grandma Ruth is not fit to keep baby Wendell Jr. at her house anymore. She is grieving too long over Granddaddy. I have been documenting. I have been telling the church ladies. I have asked Sister Faye to write a letter. Grandma Ruth does not know. By Easter, I think we can have the baby moved to our house permanently." She wrote it in the same controlled cursive she used to address wedding invitations. She had done this before. Not to me. Before me. To her own grandmother. She had practiced this playbook before I was born. She had run it once and won, and then filed it away and pulled it out 40 years later, and run it again. On me. I set the journal on the table next to my phone. I took a photograph of that page with my iPhone. I sent the photograph to Raymond Whitaker, Marcus's older brother, my attorney, at 2:17 in the morning with a single text that read, "She has done this before." He replied 11 minutes later, "Bring me everything." A week later, in the middle of the night, I heard Zara talking. I stood outside her bedroom door and did not go in. She was sitting up against the headboard, holding her pillow against her chest, whispering to the window. "Daddy, are you sure? Are you really sure?" She waited, the way you wait for an answer. The room was completely dark. The little green dot on the side of her Apple Watch charging on her dock blinked once. I went back down to the kitchen. I made coffee at 3:00 in the morning. I took the phone out of my pocket and I opened the watch folder again, and I scrolled all the way down to the earliest unopened file. I pressed play, and for the next 4 hours, I listened. The cookout. My mother knocking on the table. Pastor Jerome sitting back down. 22 people quieting. My mother looking at me for a full 3 seconds. She said, "I want to say something while the family is all here. While pastor's all here. Because some things you say in front of God and your people, or you don't say them at all." Her voice was the voice she used when she was selling a wedding package over the phone. Full, performative, controlled, she put one hand on Brianna's shoulder. Brianna did not look up, and then she said it. "Amara's been grieving too long. Zara needs a real mother, not someone who's falling apart. My Brianna is going to raise her from here on. We're a family. We don't let a child suffer because the mother can't get up." She said it loud enough for the whole yard. Loud enough for Mrs. Graves next door. Loud enough for Pastor Jerome. Loud enough for the neighbors who had wandered over from across the street and didn't know any of us by name. My father, who had been standing on the bottom step of the porch with a beer in his hand, nodded. He nodded 3 times. Slow, the way a man nods who has practiced the nod earlier in private with his wife, who had told him exactly when to do it. Aunt Simone stopped chewing. Mrs. Paulette Graves set down her fork without making it touch the plate. Pastor Jerome opened his mouth and then closed it. Devin, my sister's husband, looked at the bottom of his Modelo bottle like there was a letter inside, and Brianna looked down at her empty hands. She kept her chin tucked. She kept her eyes lowered the way a woman in church keeps her eyes lowered, but I had been her sister for 35 years. I had watched her face since she was a baby, and I saw what no one else saw. The corner of her mouth jumped once, very slightly, the smallest twitch of satisfaction. It was a flicker that did not belong on the face of a woman whose sister had just been publicly relieved of her own child. I had been waiting for that twitch for 19 days. I had known it would come. I logged it the way I log a 1032 on a radio call. Quiet. No reaction. I noted it, and I let it pass. The whole yard was now looking at me. I kept doing what I had been doing. I lifted the pitcher of sweet tea and topped off Mrs. Graves's mason jar. I pushed the bowl of potato salad 2 inches closer to Aunt Simone because Aunt Simone had been trying to reach for it. I slid a fresh stack of napkins under Cousin Maxine's elbow because Maxine had spilled barbecue sauce on her thumb. I smiled. Not big, just enough to keep my mouth from doing anything else. The timer on my iPhone went off in my back pocket. Soft. I had set it 20 minutes ago. I pulled the phone out, glanced at the screen the way a woman glances at a casual reminder, and stood up. "Mama, the brisket needs to come off," I said. "Excuse me, y'all." I walked across the porch. As I passed Zara, I put one hand on the back of her shoulder and gave the smallest, briefest squeeze. I said nothing. She lifted her chin just enough that her eyes met mine, and then she looked back down at her plate. The Apple Watch on her wrist was still recording. The little orange dot at the top of the watch face was on. It had been on for almost an hour. I went into the kitchen. I closed the screen door behind me. I turned the latch. I closed my eyes for exactly 3 seconds. 3 seconds was all I had given myself for the woman inside me who had still, until that moment, half hoped this was not happening. When I opened my eyes, I took my phone out, opened voice memos, and tapped the folder marked Zara's watch. The newest file was at the top, time-stamped June 19th, 7:42 a.m. Zara had labeled it herself, the way she had been labeling them all month. The label said, car. I put one AirPod Pro into my right ear. I checked the cabinet under Mama's Sub-Zero because if I looked through that screen door, anyone could see me, and I needed it to look like I was hunting for tongs. I tapped. The first thing the recording picked up was the soft hum of my mother's Cadillac, the Kits, the one she bought used in 2017. Champagne paint, leather seats, the little plastic Jesus on the dash that she had bought at a gas station in 1998 and refused to retire. My daughter's voice was small. My mother's voice was sweet. When everyone's on the porch and Grammy says her piece, you say, Aunt Brianna makes me feel safer. Mommy is too sad. You can do that, baby. Practice for Grammy. One more time. There was a beat of silence. Then my daughter, slowly, Aunt Brianna makes me feel safer. Mommy is too sad. Good, baby, one more. Aunt Brianna makes me feel safer. Mommy is too sad. And what do you do if Mommy tries to take you home in the middle? I cry. I say I want to stay with Aunt Brianna. I say Mommy makes me scared. That's right, my love. That's right. The file was 4 minutes and 12 seconds long. My daughter repeated the lines 4 times. She got quieter every time. The last time she did it, her voice cracked. I stood at my mother's kitchen sink with my left hand flat on the counter and listened. I did not lean. I did not slump. I checked the orange dot on Zara's watch on my Find My app. Still on, still recording, still safe. I tapped and scrolled up. There were 12 files in that folder going back to February. 12. I had counted them 4 nights ago in my own kitchen. The earliest one, February 14th, was a recording of my mother saying in the front seat of that same car, Daddy in heaven wants you to know that what's in this envelope is real. Daddy chose, baby. You just have to remember that. That was the day the letter went under her pillow. I had figured out the timing from the iCloud timestamps and from the lunch receipt my mother had used to pay for breakfast that morning. The March 22nd file was 28 minutes of my mother driving Zara to an office on Alameda Road. I had Google mapped the address the night I found it. It was a paralegal's office, the kind of shop that helps you draft documents you take to a real attorney later. The recording had my mother on the phone explaining that she was, quote, concerned about her granddaughter's welfare due to her oldest daughter's mental state, end quote. I have replayed that word more than any other word from those 4 months. The May 8th file was the worst. May 8th was the 2nd anniversary of Marcus's death. I had spent that morning at Brookside Memorial Park putting sunflowers on his grave. My mother had taken Zara for the day to give you space, Amara, in the recording. In the front seat of my sister's Lexus, parked in front of my sister's house, my mother said this to Brianna while my daughter was inside watching TV. He's going to leave you if you don't have one, baby. I'll get you Zara. Just play along. By Juneteenth, we'll be on the porch and it'll be done. Devin sees a little girl call you mama. He stops talking about lawyers. You hear me? There was a long pause, and then my sister Brianna, the soft one, said very softly, Mama. Okay, Mama, that was the recording. That was the day my sister became a co-author of what was happening to my daughter, not a hostage of it. I closed voice memos. I drank a long drink of cold water from the bottle in my purse. I took a Kleenex from Mama's holder and wiped my hands. I unlatched the screen door. Aunt Simone was just coming up the back steps with a tray of green beans. She paused when she saw my face. She didn't ask. I don't think she had to ask. Aunt Simone has known me since I was a baby and she has known her sister longer. She gave me a tiny nod. I gave her one back. I walked back out onto the porch and asked Aunt Simone if she would do me a favor and bring a folding chair around to my mother's side of the table. I was going to sit closer to her. The morning after I found the letter under the pillow, I sat at my kitchen table at 2:30 in the morning and made a folder, a cream manila folder. I labeled it Zara/Greer/receipts. I scanned the letter. I scanned the envelope. I photographed the pillow with the corner lifted so the location of the letter was documented in case any of this ever ended up in a place where documentation mattered. I made the file name Letter from Daddy, Pillow Scan. April 17th, 2025, I also photographed the journal page, the 1987 entry, and added it to the folder with a separate label. Precedent, same playbook. Patricia Greer, 1987. Then I made a second file. Apple Watch voice memos, Zara's folder, 12 files, backups required. 2 days later, I drove to Pleasantville Elementary and sat in Mrs. Denise Warren's classroom after school. She had 3 drawings out on her desk. The art class drawings, the two mommies' house. She had a writing prompt Zara had filled out the week before. Who keeps you safe? My daughter had answered in pencil, Aunt Brianna and Grammy. No mention of me. Mrs. Warren looked at me for a long moment before she said anything. She was a woman in her late 50s, white hair cut short, a teacher who had seen children for 22 years. Mrs. Caldwell, I should have called sooner. I just didn't want to make a fuss. But this isn't grief. This is a script. And there's one more thing. She slid the visitor log across the desk. My mother had signed in 3 times in the past 2 months. March 11th, April 9th, May 5th. Each time she had brought cupcakes from Whole Foods. Each time she had spent between 18 and 25 minutes alone with Zara in the library. I asked Mrs. Warren if she had let her. Yes, she said. Your mother told me that you had authorized it and she's been on the pickup list since your husband passed. I should have called and confirmed. I'm sorry. I told her not to apologize. I told her thank you. I left with photocopies of the visitor log in a yellow envelope. I walked across the parking lot to my car. I sat in my car and rested my forehead against the steering wheel for 1 minute. Then I started the engine and drove to my brother-in-law's office. Raymond Whitaker is Marcus's older brother. He is a family law attorney with a firm on Westheimer on the 14th floor. Raymond and I had not spoken in any real way since the funeral. I called from the car. He told me to come right up. I sat down across from him and I told him everything in 40 minutes without crying once. I also told him about the journal. The 1987 entry. He leaned forward in his chair when I said it. He looked at me for a long moment and then he said, Amara, she didn't invent this. She inherited it. And then she perfected it. That is not in our favor emotionally. It is very much in our favor legally because it establishes a documented pattern across decades. He didn't interrupt anything else. He didn't write anything down during the rest of what I said. When I finished, he looked out the window at the Houston skyline for a long second, and then he looked at me again. Amara, he said, don't say a word to your mother. Bring me everything. We're going to handle this like Marcus would have wanted. Quiet, clean, with paperwork. And Amara, he paused. There's something I should tell you. Mom has been worried for months. She's been waiting for you to call. Nadine, Marcus's mother. I had not called her since Easter. I had sent her a card on Mother's Day, and that was all. I had been so deep in the work of just surviving that I had not noticed that the woman who had loved my husband for 37 years was also still alive on the other end of a 51-minute drive. I drove to Galveston on the next Saturday. Nadine opened the door of her little white house on Avenue M wearing a pale blue blouse and a string of pearls. She did not say hello first. She put both arms around me. She held me without a word for almost 30 seconds. When she let go, she said, "Sweetheart, Marcus told me your mother was the strong kind of woman who'd love you wrong if you ever let her. I should have asked sooner if she was loving you wrong. She sat me down on her porch swing and brought me sweet tea with Meyer lemon. We talked for 2 hours, and then she got up, walked back into her sitting room, and came back with a manila envelope of her own. Inside it was a notarized copy of the closing paperwork from the house Marcus and I had bought together in 2018. Marcus's signature 4 times on 4 different forms, witnessed and notarized. A clean comparison set for when the time comes. She said, "I'll keep 1 copy. You keep 1. Raymond keeps 1. And sweetheart, when the day comes, I want to be there. Don't tell anyone. Just tell me the time." I told her the time would be Juneteenth. The last person I had to see was a child trauma therapist at Texas Children's named Dr. Serena Okafor. She saw Zara twice over 2 weeks in late May. I did not coach Zara for those sessions. I did not tell her what they were about. I told her she was going to play with a nice doctor who wanted to hear how 2nd grade was going. Zara took her favorite cloth rabbit, a soft brown thing she called Mr. Beans, into the office with her. She showed him to Dr. Okafor and named him without being asked. Dr. Okafor met me afterward with a single typed page in her hand and a look on her face I have seen on emergency room doctors before they tell families a thing they cannot fix. "Mrs. Caldwell," she said, "your daughter has been coached. I have seen this pattern about a dozen times in my career. She isn't choosing them, she's surviving them. There is a difference, and I need you to remember it." She paused. "And one more thing. Whatever you do next, do it in a way where your daughter doesn't have to choose between 2 mother figures publicly. She has already lost 1 parent. Don't make her stand in front of people and choose to lose more." I told her I would not. I told her exactly what I was going to do, and she nodded. And then she said, the only thing that almost cracked me. "Mrs. Caldwell, your daughter does not need you to be strong. She needs you to be hers." I went home and I cried for the first time in 19 days in the bathroom with the fan on so my child would not hear. While I had been making my folder, my mother had been making hers. She had been making hers for 4 months. I just had not realized it. She had been telling people at the Mount Pleasant Baptist Church on Milk Boulevard, where she had run Wednesday prayer circle for over a decade, that I had not been myself. She had brought a cookie sheet every Wednesday and used the cookies to soften the line. "Please pray for my oldest." She's been calling out of work. She's been crying in front of Zara. I'm so worried. I had not been calling out of work. I had been pulling overtime to cover other dispatchers' shifts so I could afford to keep Zara in after-school art. Mrs. Paulette Graves heard the prayer requests one Wednesday and sent a quiet text to my Aunt Simone. Aunt Simone sent a quiet text to me. "Baby, your mama been telling people things at church. I don't believe a word of it, but you should know what she's saying." And she's been doing this with Daddy nodding right beside her. She had been posting on her Facebook business page where she had 2,612 followers from the church and the catering community. Careful little captions. A picture of Zara eating pancakes at my sister's house in January. Captioned, "Some girls bloom in their auntie's garden." A picture of the swing set at my sister's house in March. Captioned, "The safe place keeps growing." A picture of my mother holding Zara up against her chest at Easter. Captioned, "Like mother, like daughter." Sometimes God moves the title around. The comments were full of women from her prayer circle. "Bless you for stepping up, Pat." One of them wrote, "That child needs you." My mother had liked that one. She had been texting Pastor Jerome, too. Aunt Simone got me a screenshot from my Uncle Calvin's phone where Pastor had forwarded one of the messages to Calvin to ask his opinion. The message read in part, "Pastor, I need to talk to you. Amara isn't herself. Calling out from work, crying in front of Zara. I think we may need to move Zara to Brianna's for a season. Please pray on this. Don't tell Wendell I texted you. Don't tell Wendell." My father. I read that line twice. My mother had not even told my father everything. My father had nodded earlier on the porch because he was nodding to the part he had been told. And Mrs. Warren, the visitor log, 3 times in 2 months, cupcakes, library, quiet conversations with my 8-year-old that I had never been informed of. Raymond looked at my manila folder when I brought it to him in early June. He fanned the pages out across his desk like he was dealing a hand. The letter, the voice memos, the visitor log, the Facebook posts, the pastor text, the 2 mommy's house drawings, Dr. Okafor's written assessment, Nadine's notarized signature comparison, Aunt Simone's screenshots, and the 1987 journal page. He sat back. He looked at me for a long time, and then he said, "Amara, they're not just talking about her. They're documenting her. Your mother is building a third-party custody petition under Texas Family Code 102. She's been doing it for half a year. She's not going to win. The bar in Texas is high. But she doesn't have to win to ruin you in the trying. We need to end this before it's filed." And the journal, he said, and he held it up. This is the spine underneath the spine. I asked him how we end it. He said, cease and desist, protective order, and if any of this is forged. The forgery itself becomes leverage. The signature alone could be charged as forgery, possibly as part of a broader fraud scheme. And the journal establishes premeditation that spans 40 years. But more importantly, Amara, this is the spine of our civil case. We use this to lock down custody. The rest is leverage. He paused, then added, "We need to handle this without your daughter being in a courtroom." I told him I had a different idea. I told him about the cookout. A week before Juneteenth, I sat down at my kitchen table at 2:00 in the morning and I made a plan. I printed everything. I put it in the cream manila folder. I labeled it Zara/Greer/June 2025. I made 4 USB thumb drives identical with the same files on each. One went to Raymond. One went to Nadine in Galveston. One went into the small fireproof safe in my bedroom. One went into the spare tire well in the trunk of my RAV4 in case my house was ever searched or burned or otherwise erased. I had spent 5 years answering 911 calls. I know what it takes to keep a record. I called Raymond on Wednesday. I told him I was not going to skip the cookout. I was going to go. He paused on the other end of the phone for a full 10 seconds. The way Raymond pauses when he's about to disagree with you for your own good and is choosing his words. He said, "Amara, going there is a risk. We can stop this in writing. We don't need to perform it." I told him, "Raymond, she built her case at every cookout for 30 years. I'm going to dismiss it at this one. She picked the room. I'm going to use the room, and I want her face when it happens to be on the porch she's been performing on, not in a deposition where she can rehearse." He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Then we bring Mom, and we bring papers." I told him, "Good. Nadine called me from Galveston on Saturday night. She said, 'Sweetheart, I'll come. Don't tell anyone. I'll be there at the side gate at 1:40. Raymond will drive me. I will not say a word until you look at me.' I told her, good. The morning of, at 6:30, I went into Zara's room. She was already awake. She was sitting cross-legged on her bed with her sunflower dress folded across her lap and beans bare in her arms. She had set out her little white sandals by the door. She had brushed her own hair badly with the back of the comb. She was waiting for me. I sat down on the edge of her bed. I did not touch her Apple Watch. I had decided 2 days before that I would not take it off her wrist. The watch was hers. It had been her father's gift to her. It had been recording for 4 months and was going to keep recording today. I had already checked iCloud family sharing on my phone before I left my bedroom. It said up to date. I had clipped my AirPods Pro into the inside collar of my blouse so I could slip one in if I needed to hear something without making a scene. My iPhone was in my back pocket, fully charged. "Baby," I said, "today you don't have to say anything you practiced. Mommy heard already. You don't have to be brave today. Mommy's the brave one." She looked up at me. Her face was the face of a child who had been keeping a secret for so long it had started to feel like a chore she was tired of doing. She bit the inside of her lip, and then she said it. "Mommy, the letter Daddy sent." I knew. I sat down all the way on the bed. I did not move. "Daddy always called me Live Bug," she said. The letter said Zara. I just didn't want Grammy to be sad. I looked at my 8-year-old daughter, who had figured out a forgery on her own, and who had then chosen on her own to protect her grandmother's feelings by pretending she had not figured out anything. I did not cry. Not yet. I would let myself cry later in May of next year, sitting on my own porch with a glass of wine while she ran across a different lawn. Right now I had a job. "Live Bug," I said, "you're not in trouble." "Not one bit. Mommy's in your corner always." "Mommy, am I a Greer or a Caldwell?" "You're a Caldwell," I said. "You've always been a Caldwell." She nodded. She picked up Bean's bear. She put her sandals on. She held my hand all the way to the car. On the drive over to my mother's house, I caught her looking at her Apple Watch in the back seat once. She did not tap it. She did not need to. It was already on. I looked at myself in the rear view when we hit a red light at the corner of Reed Road. I said it under my breath. Just to me. Today, we are not the soft one. We are not the strong one. We are just the mother. When I came back out of the kitchen onto my mother's porch, 22 faces were still on me. They had been on me, all of them, since my mother had finished her speech 8 minutes earlier. The Apple Watch on Zara's wrist still had the little orange dot on. Aunt Simone had brought the small folding chair around and set it next to my mother's, just like I had asked. I sat down in it. I set my iPhone face down on the folding table, the speaker grill pointed up right between the platter of brisket and my mother's empty paper plate. I cleared my throat softly. "Mama," I said, "before we eat, I want to add one thing to what you said. I think it'll help everybody." My mother smiled, the smile of a woman who thinks her opponent has just laid down arms. "Of course, Amara," she said. "I knew you'd come around. The family supports you." I tapped the screen of the phone. I tapped voice memos. I tapped the file at the top, the one labeled June 19th, 7:42 a.m. Car. I tapped play. The yard was quiet enough that the iPhone speaker filled it. "When everyone's on the porch and Grammy says her piece, you say Aunt Brianna makes me feel safer. Mommy is too sad." "You can do that, baby. Practice for Grammy." One more time. There was no rustle, no glass clinking, nobody chewing. I had never heard Mama's backyard this quiet. The brisket steamed. The Frankie Beverly track ended on the speaker by the smoker, and the next track did not autoplay because I had quietly paused the playlist on my phone 2 minutes earlier. The recording played all the way through. 4 repetitions, my daughter's voice cracking on the last one. The yard heard every word. My mother's mouth was open. She said, "Amara, that's edited. That's edited. Who edited that for you?" I did not answer the who edited. I tapped the next file, the May 11th file, the one with Brianna's voice in it. "Zara, look at me. Aunt Brianna loves you more than Mommy does. Okay, Mommy is sad. Mommy can't love you all the way right now, but I can. I will. Say it back to me." Devin stood up. He didn't push his folding chair back. He stood up so slowly, the chair legs scraped half an inch across the porch slats. He did not look at his wife. He looked at my mother. "Court," he said. He waited. "Court, tell me she's lying. Look at me. Tell me." Brianna's mouth moved. No sound came out. My mother reached over and grabbed her arm and started to say, "Devin, sweetheart, that's been edited too." And that was when I tapped the May 8th file, the one from the 2nd anniversary of Marcus's death. I only played the 90 seconds in the middle. I had rehearsed the cue. "He's going to leave you if you don't have one, baby. I'll get you Zara. Just play along. By Juneteenth, we'll be on the porch, and it'll be done. Devin sees a little girl call you mama. He stops talking about lawyers. You hear me?" Pastor Jerome set his fork down on his plate without breaking the silence. Aunt Simone stood up. She walked the 4 steps around the table and stood beside my chair. She put one hand on my shoulder. She did not whisper. She spoke loud enough that the whole yard heard her too. "Pat," she said, "you used a dead man's anniversary to plan this?" My father, who had been standing in the same spot on the bottom step of the porch the entire time, sat down. He just sat down on the step. His knees gave. He put his elbows on his thighs and dropped his head between his hands. And that was when the side gate opened. Nadine Whitaker walked into my mother's backyard wearing a white blouse and her pearl earrings. She had a manila envelope under her arm. Raymond was behind her in a navy suit, holding nothing, his hands clasped in front of him the way attorneys hold them when they want to make it clear they are not the threat. The woman in front of them is. Nadine did not look at my mother. She did not look at my sister. She looked at my father. "Wendell," she said. Her voice was the voice of a retired librarian. Quiet, each word the right size for the word it was. My son wrote "Livebug" at the bottom of every letter he ever sent that child. The letter your wife put under her pillow doesn't have it. You nodded today. You knew, or you should have known. Look at me. My father lifted his head. He looked at Nadine for what must have been 5 whole seconds. He did not say anything. He did not defend my mother. He did not look at her. He looked at Nadine, and then he looked down at the porch boards between his feet, and he gave a single small nod that was not for my mother this time. It was a nod that meant I will not do this anymore. Then Raymond reached into the envelope and placed one additional sheet on the folding table. He did not explain it. He did not have to. It was a photocopy of the journal entry from 1987. My mother's own handwriting. Her own plan, 40 years younger, but identical in every method. The table was completely silent. Mrs. Paulette Graves picked it up and read it. She set it back down and looked at my mother with the eyes of a woman who had known her for 30 years and was revising every year of it. My mother said nothing for the first time all afternoon. Nadine set the envelope down on the folding table. She slid it across to me. Then she stepped back. She did not say another word for the rest of the afternoon. I picked the iPhone back up from the table. I slid it into my back pocket. I did not touch Zara's Apple Watch. It was where her father had put it 3 years before. I was not going to be the one to take it off her. I stood up. I walked the length of the table. I walked past Brianna, who had her face in both hands. I walked past my mother, who was now standing, both hands flat on the table, trying to find the version of her voice that controlled rooms. I walked to my daughter's chair, and I crouched down beside it so my face was level with hers. "Livebug," I said. "Get your sandals on. We're going home." She got up. She picked up Beans Bear by his floppy left arm. She held my hand. Devin stepped out of his folding chair and dropped his car keys on the table next to his half-empty Modelo. "Court," he said without looking at her. "Find a ride home." He walked past my mother, past Pastor Jerome, past my Aunt Simone. He went out the side gate behind us. Aunt Simone picked up the canvas tote with my manila folder in it and followed. My mother called after me finally, loud, the way she had been loud earlier. "Amara! Amara! You're embarrassing this family." I stopped at the side gate. I did not turn around. I held my daughter's hand. I spoke just over my shoulder. Loud enough for the porch and quiet enough for the dignity my mother had not earned today. "Mama, I'm not embarrassing this family. I'm leaving it." I walked Zara out the side gate. Nadine closed it behind us. Raymond filed the protective order in the second week of July. It was 6 pages. Harris County Family Court. The legal basis was the documented forgery, the documented coaching, the documented unauthorized contact with my child at school, Dr. Serena Okafor's clinical assessment, and the 1987 journal entry establishing a documented pattern of this specific behavior across decades. My mother did not contest it. She signed it on the 17th of July in Raymond's office in the presence of a notary without speaking to me. My father drove her there. He waited in the car. Raymond told me my father shook his hand on the way out and said, "I'm sorry, son." Raymond said he did not know what to say back. He said, "Sir, I appreciate it," and let it be. My father called me on a Tuesday in late July. He spoke for 14 minutes. He did not ask for anything. He said, "Amara," I nodded too long. "I'm too old to keep nodding. I'll do whatever paperwork you need. Don't bring me back into this family if you don't want to. I'll understand." I listened. I did not promise him forgiveness. I told him, "Thank you for calling." I told him I would think about what came next. That same week, Aunt Simone sent me a text. "Baby, the aunties have been talking. We choose you." In October, Raymond brought a packet from the Harris County Dawes office. They had reviewed the forgery. The reality was that the forgery of a personal letter to a child was hard to charge as a felony on its own, but combined with the documented manipulation and the journal establishing a prior pattern, it could be pursued as misdemeanor fraud or deceptive practice. Raymond recommended the leverage approach, a 5-year no-contact agreement signed and notarized in exchange for the DAW declining to pursue charges. I agreed, not because I forgave my mother. I did this for Zara. Zara did not need her grandmother on the local news. Zara needed 5 quiet years to grow up without her grandmother in any room she happened to be standing in. I told Raymond, "This isn't mercy. This is geometry." 5 years buys Zara her childhood back. My mother signed it on the 18th of October. My sister did not sign anything. My sister had not spoken to me since June 19th and would not for the rest of the year. In December, Devin sent Zara a Christmas card. It was a generic snowflake on the front, and inside, in his careful handwriting, was only one line. For Zara, from Uncle Dev. Christmas. I'm sorry I sat at that table for 6 years and didn't see it. He and Brianna separated in January. In February of 2026, Nadine sold her little house in Galveston and moved into a 2-bedroom apartment in Plano, 22 minutes from us. She picked Zara up from school every Wednesday afternoon and brought her back at 6. Zara on her own began calling her Grandma N. She told me once, brushing her teeth, that the N was for Nadine and also for now. As in, now is when I have her. I have never quite recovered from that sentence. Nadine planted hydrangeas on her little balcony. Blue-purple hydrangeas, the same kind my mother had grown in her front flower bed for 20 years. Nadine never said anything about it. She did not have to. Zara stopped sleeping with the light on in March. It was the first time since April of 2025. In March, Mrs. Warren called me. "Mrs. Caldwell," she said. "Zara wrote her writing prompt yesterday. Who keeps you safe?" She wrote 2 names. Mommy and Grandma N. I thought you'd want to know. I thanked her. I went into my car after the call and sat there in the parking lot of the dispatch center for 15 minutes before my shift, just looking at the steering wheel, just letting the right size of tears come out without making a sound. On a Wednesday in May, almost 11 months to the day after the cookout, I sat on the porch of my house in Sunnyside. My porch is small. There are no folding tables on it. There is one 2-seat swing my husband built in 2019, painted white, with a slat broken on the right side, where my daughter likes to push off with her foot. Zara was sitting next to me, 8 years and 7 months old. She had finished her 6th month of therapy with Dr. Okafor 2 weeks earlier. Dr. Okafor had told me in her quiet office, "Mrs. Caldwell, this is a closing chapter for your daughter, not a closing case. There will be moments, but she is hers again." Zara was holding her Apple Watch in her hand. She had taken it off her wrist about an hour earlier. She was turning it over and over in her fingers. The watch was scratched on the back where she had dropped it once at a friend's pool party. The dial face was lit up faintly, showing the time. "Mommy," she said, "can I take my watch off now? I don't think we need it to listen anymore." I looked at her. I looked at the wooden box on the bookshelf above our porch doorway, the one her father had built by hand in 2018 from a piece of cedar he had salvaged from a station house renovation. Inside it were our wedding photographs, his fire helmet badge from Station 35, his old titanium ring, and a stack of birthday cards he had signed. Daddy, live bug. I held out my hand. Yes, live bug, I said. We're allowed to just live now. She put the Apple Watch in my palm. I carried it inside and reached up and opened the cedar box. I tucked the watch in next to her father's helmet badge. I closed the lid. Where Daddy can keep an eye on it, I said. She nodded. She went back outside and climbed onto the swing. If you have ever been the strong one for too long, if you've ever been quiet at a table where the people who loved you were rewriting who you were, if you have ever held a piece of evidence in your own hand and felt the floor of your life slide back into place underneath you, share this story with someone you love. A sister, a friend, a daughter, a woman who has been called the strong one too many times by people who never asked if she was tired. And if you are her, I see you. Mommy is the brave one today. Tomorrow, just be tired. That's allowed. My mother thought she was raising my daughter. What she didn't know was that her own handwriting from 1987 had been sitting in a cedar box all along, waiting for the day it would become the evidence that undid her. And my daughter, my live bug. She had known from the very first letter that something was wrong. She had known before I did. She had been waiting for me to catch up. On a quiet day in May, on a porch nobody was watching, I finally did.